Morning light slipped through the thin curtains, falling across the old floorboards just like it had for decades. My bones moved slow these days, but there was something peaceful about the silence. I padded into the kitchen, my slippers whispering against the linoleum. The kettle sat where it always did, next to Charles' mug, the one with the chipped handle he refused to throw away. The garage door creaked when I passed it, like it was reminding me what waited inside. His motorcycle, still there, still polished, still his. I didn't touch it, not once in all these years. That bike was sacred. His pride, his roar, his escape. The keychain dangled nearby, same one he carried everywhere. Hold the line. He meant family. He meant loyalty. Javon used to sit on that bike when he was little, pretending he was off to save the world. Lately, he couldn't even save a conversation, always rushing out, always on edge. I told myself grief did that to people. Still, it hurt, the way he drifted, like I wasn't enough to come home to anymore. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and sat in the sun-drenched silence, letting memory wash over me. That's when the phone rang. Sharp, unexpected, an unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. Hello? Hi, ma'am. I'm calling from Clearwater, Florida. Just wanted to say thanks again for the bike. The what? The motorcycle. The black classic. Your son said it was his late dad's. She's a beauty. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My throat closed around something that wasn't quite shock, but worse. My hand tightened around the mug. He sold it to you? Yeah. We met up last weekend. He said it had to go. Anyway, it's in good hands. The line went dead, but the silence after screamed. I walked to the garage. The door swung open slow, like it was afraid too. The space was empty. No keys, no bike, no Charles. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just stood there and whispered, "Thank you for calling." My reflection in the garage window looked hollow. It felt like losing Charles all over again, but this time, nobody died. Something worse happened. My own son sold my memory. The front door opened, and Javon walked in, reeking of last night, cologne, sweat, and secrets. He froze when he saw me standing in the hallway. "Where's your father's bike, Jay?" He looked away. "Ma, I already know. I just want to hear it from your lips. I sold it. Nia and I needed a break. Miami was on sale." I blinked. "You sold your father's legacy? For a beach selfie?" "It's just a bike, Ma." I stepped closer. "It was never just a thing. It was a promise. He died, Javon. And you promised." He rolled his eyes. "Things change." "No, baby, people change." But I didn't say it. Not out loud. I remembered the funeral, the way Javon knelt beside the bike, pressing his forehead to the cold steel. "I'll protect this for you, Pop," he'd whispered, voice cracking like a boy, not yet a man. That boy, he was gone. I walked back into the garage, reaching for the empty hook where the keys used to hang. Only the keychain remained. "Hold the line." I gripped it tight, metal biting into my palm. Blood welled, but I didn't let go. Not yet. It wasn't about the metal or the wheels. It was about the man who taught my son better. And as I stood there, keychain in hand, I realized this wasn't just about a motorcycle. It was about everything we let slide, until it breaks us. The rest of that day moved slow, like time knew something inside me had snapped and didn't want to rush the damage. I found myself in the kitchen, washing dishes that hadn't been used. My hands worked, but my mind stayed somewhere else entirely. The soapy water didn't feel real. The plate in my hand didn't feel real. What felt real was the space in that garage, that absence, that ache. Betrayal doesn't come crashing through a window or screaming at your door. No, it comes quiet. It lingers like smoke. It simmers under your skin until it settles, heavier than rage ever could be. And what Javon did? That wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. Upstairs, his music thumped through the floor like he didn't hear me, didn't see me, didn't feel the shift in the house. He was pretending again, like he'd been doing for months. Acting like silence could undo the damage. But silence only makes the lies louder. I picked up the phone and called my sister, Bernice. She answered on the second ring. You sound tight, Desi. I am. You talked to him? He told me he sold it for a vacation. Bernice didn't react. That's how she was. Calm, sharp, all truth. She had a way of cutting through mess like it owed her money. You taught him better, taught him to respect, to value. But sometimes, teaching ain't enough if they ain't listening. I leaned against the counter, letting her words sink deep. She was right. Love don't guarantee learning. And sometimes, raising a child right just means watching them choose wrong anyway. By late afternoon, I needed air. I threw on my coat and walked to the diner down the block, the one Charles and I used to go to on Sunday mornings. I just wanted coffee and something warm to hold on to. I was stirring cream into my cup when someone called out, Miss O? It was Dion, one of Javon's old high school boys. Tall now, beard grown in, but still had that same crooked grin. Dion, baby, look at you. I smiled, genuinely glad to see a face that didn't remind me of betrayal. We talked small for a bit, catching up. Then he pulled out his phone to show me pictures from his trip to Atlanta. And in between swipes, I saw a photo that stopped my breath. Javon. In Miami. Arms wrapped around Naya. Standing in front of a rented Lamborghini. Oh yeah, Dion laughed. He was flossin'. Told folks you gave him the bike. Said it was your gift. You wanted him to let go. Finally take a break. I didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Just nodded and sipped my coffee, like he hadn't just ripped something open in me. He lied. Not just to strangers, but about me. Used my name like currency to buy approval. Made me the fool in his story. That wasn't just selfish. That was calculated. Well, I said, voice steady. Thank you, baby. I needed to hear that. I paid for my coffee and walked out into the wind. It was colder than I expected, but I welcomed it. Let it slap some clarity into my cheeks. Back home, I didn't go inside. I walked straight to the garage and sat down on the step. That hollow space hit different in the dusk light, empty, but full of echoes. I remembered the day Charles rolled that bike home, big grin on his face, first union paycheck in his hand. We don't have much, he'd said, patting the seat, but we ride like we do. We built our pride from scraps. That bike wasn't just his. It was us. The start of everything. A symbol of making it through without breaking. I pulled the keychain from my purse. Hold the line. This time, I didn't just hold it. I spoke to it. He knew, I whispered. He knew this would hurt me. That changed it all. It wasn't carelessness. It wasn't youth. It was intention. Javon didn't just let me down. He planned how to do it, then smiled for the camera. I put the keychain back in my purse and stood up slowly, every joint aching, but my mind sharp. And just like that, I stopped asking why he did it, and started asking what I was going to do about it. I came back from the diner slower than I left, each step heavier, not from exhaustion, but from what I knew now, what I couldn't unknow. The front door creaked when I opened it, like even the house was tired of holding in all this mess. I hung my coat, took a breath, and moved through the living room without turning on any lights. Just the way Charles liked it when he was thinking, I lit the candle by his picture. Put his old leather jacket back on the hook by the door, the one he wore to every church picnic, every union meeting, little rituals, tiny moments I could still control. But then I noticed it. A photo frame on the shelf, crooked, and the garage door just barely cracked open. None of it big, none of it loud, but everything in me screamed, intrusion. When trust gets cracked, even the air in your home feels like it don't belong. I sat down, stared at the dim light dancing against the wall. My mind circled Javon's words. You told me I could let go, Ma. And that boy Dion repeating them like scripture. I remembered a quote I read once in a battered magazine at the laundromat. The worst lies are the ones told by the ones who kissed you goodnight. That hit different now. This wasn't about a bike, wasn't about a trip to Miami. This was about disrespect that had been building in silence, and tonight, I needed to make that silence answer. I went into the kitchen and started dinner. Nothing fancy, just cornbread, cabbage, and smothered chicken, Charles's favorite. The kind of meal that made a man sit down and listen. I set the table for 3. Not because I believed we'd break bread in peace, but because sometimes you have to serve truth with a plate of familiarity. Javon came in first, smelling like cologne that cost more than sense. Jamesia followed, thumbs never leaving her phone screen. They sat, stiff, unsure. I stayed quiet at first. Just let the food talk while I watched. Then I asked, Jay, who told you that bike was a gift? He looked up, surprised. What? You said I gave it to you. I'd like to know when that happened. He shifted, glanced at Jamesia. She didn't meet his eye. I figured you'd be okay with it, he said. I nodded slowly, wiped my hands on a dish towel. Then I walked to the counter, picked up my phone, and hit speaker. Rochelle? I said. Hey, Miss Odessa. Baby, let me ask you plain. Did you tell folk I don't understand money? That I gave away Charles' bike 'cause I didn't know no better? Silence. Then a shaky breath. I just repeated what Jay said at the cookout. I didn't mean... Thank you, I said, and hung up. Javon's face flushed. Jamesia dropped her fork. You lied to your people. Then let that lie become my truth. Ma, it's not like that. It is exactly like that, I snapped, but didn't raise my voice. You dragged my name through the dirt so you could shine on borrowed light, and you thought I wouldn't hear it? Jamesia tried. It's just, we were tired, burnt out. It was one trip. Don't insult me with small talk, I said. You wanted to show off, and you sold your father's memory to do it. I stood, slow but solid. Now, I want to see the receipt, the sale, the money trail, or you tell this whole table, and God himself, that you lied. Javon pushed back from the table, chair scraping. I'm not doing this. You already did it, I replied. He stormed out. Jamesia followed, half apologizing as she grabbed her purse. I stood there, alone in the kitchen. The overhead light flickered once, like it, too, was exhausted. I sat down slowly, letting the silence settle back in. I reached into my bag, found the keychain. Charles's voice echoed in my mind, the way he used to say after a long day. You're stronger than you think, Desi. I picked up my phone and texted Bernice. I need your help. I'm not silent anymore. Then I stepped out onto the porch. The night air bit at my skin. I listened for footsteps, arguments, the sound of regret, but there was nothing. They think I'll break, I whispered to no one. But a lie told to the world is a wound I wear like armor. Just then, my phone lit up, a voicemail from Rochelle, and when I heard her tone, I knew this was never just about the bike. Even after the confrontation, the house felt hollow. I walked through the shadows in the garage, senses alert. The tool rack was off by a few inches. The concrete floor bore tire marks, not fresh, but new enough to know someone had rolled something through. Dust disturbed. My breath tight. I ran a finger along the bare spot where the bike rested. Its outline was still faint. I felt Charles there, in the dust, humming as he waxed that steel. The sanctuary we built together felt like a hollow shell. I closed the door gently, careful not to slam it. Every movement deliberate. Tonight, I would document. Nothing would pass unseen. I stepped into the house. Javon came in carrying a box of clothes, acting casual. Why you always in that room? He asked, though his eyes flickered. That bike was junk. We needed something real for the trip. His voice drooped at the end, hoping it sounded neutral. I looked at him, measured. That junk carried your father's memory, and my trust. I asked for receipts, messages, bank statements, all the threads in a paper trail. He deflected. I'm making a big deal out of nothing, Ma. Every word went into my ledger, saved inside my mind like bullets waiting for the right moment. Later, under the moonlight, I went back to the garage. My feet stumbled over a small piece of wood or metal. I fell hard to my knees, cold, Shame. Pain. I stood slow, brushing off my skirt. The dark outline of Javon stood in the doorway. He spoke low. "Don't pretend you don't know I did it." My voice shook, but I held firm. "I know enough." We didn't move. Neither of us broke. The moment stretched. Son versus mother, pride versus shame. Words unsaid, but loud as thunder. I went back inside, locked doors, flipped on porch light. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my notebook. I titled it, "The Ledger, What Was Taken." I began listing names, dates, lies. I remembered Charles once telling me, "Pain is an invitation to know yourself, not a reason to fold." So I refused to fold. I drafted notes, outlined confrontation, thought through demands, options. I would demand repayment or revoke privileges. Start taking back what Javon had quietly assumed. I was ready. The morning came before the sun did. I woke up without needing an alarm, the kind of awakening that comes from unfinished business, not rest. The house was quiet. No TV, no gospel hum from the radio, just silence, the kind that forces you to listen to your own breath. I sat at the kitchen table with my old notebook, the one I'd labeled the ledger last night, and started to write. Not just notes this time, but truths. Every word was a boundary being drawn. Coffee brewed low and steady behind me. I didn't even pour it right away. The sound alone grounded me. For years I mistook silence for peace, but peace don't hide behind fear. I thought about what my mama used to say. "What you allow is what will continue." That line hit hard today. Because I'd been allowing disrespect to live under my roof, feeding it, hoping it would grow into gratitude. But it didn't. It grew into entitlement. And this morning, that seed stopped getting watered. The front door opened around 8. Bernice came in without knocking, same as always. She held a brown bag full of collard greens and ginger ale, her version of comfort food and medicine all in one. "You look like you ain't slept," she said, setting the bag down. "I slept enough to see things clear," I replied. She sat across from me. "Tell me." So I did. Every piece of it. The sale, the lie, the way folks around the neighborhood whispered that I was losing my grip. I didn't cry. I just spoke, slow and plain. Bernice didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she leaned back and crossed her arms. "You taught that boy respect," she said. "But now you gotta teach him boundaries." I nodded. "Boundaries," I repeated, like the word itself was a kind of weapon I'd never learned to use. Bernice took a pen from her purse and slid it across the table. "Write down what you need from him. Don't just talk it. Make it real. Paper makes power." I wrote, "Restitution or removal." Then I looked her in the eye. "He either pays back what he took or he moves out. Simple as that." She smiled faintly. "This ain't revenge, Desi. It's restoration. You setting the record straight." We rehearsed what I'd say, like lawyers prepping a case. I even practiced my tone. Calm, but final. Bernice kept saying, "Don't let him turn it into a shouting match. You stay the judge, not the plaintiff." By late afternoon, the light shifted through the blinds. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. And then, the door opened. Javon. He came in halfway through our talk, stood there, arms crossed, listening just long enough to realize the conversation was about him. "So this what y'all do now? Hold court on me?" he said, voice rising. I turned slowly, notebook still open. "We were just talking about next steps." "What kind of steps?" "The kind that lead you toward accountability," I said. "You're gonna sign a restitution agreement, or you're gonna leave this house within 48 hours. His face twisted. "You serious right now? Over a motorcycle? Over money?" "This isn't about money," I said. "It's about legacy. Your father built this family on work, not lies." He slammed his hands on the table. "You choosing money over your own son?" I stood. "No. I'm choosing truth over the comfort of pretending everything's fine." Bernice didn't move, just watched the exchange like a referee who'd seen too many games end the same way. Javon pulled his keys from his pocket and threw them down hard. "You'll regret pushing me like this," he said. He turned and walked out, the sound of the door shaking the walls as it closed. Jamesia stood in the hallway, half in shadow, eyes wide, caught between loyalty and fear. She didn't speak, just stepped aside as he passed. When the silence returned, it didn't sting like before. It felt earned. I picked up Charles' photo from the mantel, dusted the glass, traced his smile with my thumb. I carried it into my bedroom and set it on the nightstand. That picture didn't belong to the living room anymore. It belonged close, where his strength still reached me. Then I pulled out his old gospel record. "Hold on, change is coming." I set it on the player and let the scratchy sound fill the house. It wasn't just music, it was declaration. I walked from room to room, noting everything I'd lost to keeping the peace, my voice, my space, my boundaries. Then, one by one, I started reclaiming them, moving furniture, closing doors, rewriting what this home meant. As the song played, I whispered, "A woman who's been pushed far enough doesn't break. She redraws the line." The doorbell rang. I wiped my hands, walked to the front. When I opened the door, it wasn't Javon. It was a man I hadn't seen in 10 years, holding a document with my name on it. The doorbell rang just as dusk settled over the house. My heart leapt to my throat. I opened it slowly to see Raymond, Charles's old friend and once trusted lawyer, standing there with an envelope in his gloved hand. He looked older now, but his eyes were steady, quiet. He said, "Miss Odessa, Charles left this with me years ago. He told me to deliver it only if his legacy was ever threatened." I invited him in, walked him past the living room and toward the dining table. My hands shook a little as I accepted the envelope. I seated him opposite me, the room silent but heavy. Raymond cleared his throat and unfolded the papers. The contents stunned me. A legal document granting me sole decision-making authority over the estate, including clauses Charles wrote in should any heir misuse assets. I sat in disbelief, realizing I had power I never used. Love always got in my way. Raymond watched as my face hardened. "This ends tonight," I decided quietly in that hush. Later, just past midnight, Javon returned, as though nothing had shifted. I met him in the kitchen, the envelope laid flat between us. Calm, I spoke the truth. "I have something to show you. Evidence you crossed a line." He laughed, disbelieving. "What, you gonna sue your own son?" I didn't flinch. I replied, "I'd rather teach my son right than enable a man wrong." And I laid it all bare. The document, his unauthorized sale, violations of the estate clause. His face went pale when I revealed Charles had mandated forfeiture of inheritance if any family member used estate assets selfishly. Javon froze. The vacation he booked, the Airbnb, the car rental, paid with estate funds. His eyes widened. He stood, eyes wild, and stormed out. But this time, he didn't take control. I watched him go with no regret, only finality. Moments later, my phone lit up. Jamesia fired off texts, accusing me of tearing us apart. A cousin called, mocking me as a cold-hearted churchwoman. Then came a Facebook post, Javon framing it like I had disowned him over a motorcycle. A neighbor knocked to show me, screenshots pouring in. I saved every one. I said nothing. No response. Silence is power when words can be used against you. In my bedroom, I finally let grief catch up. I held the letter, stared at Charles's photo, lit a candle. I wish you were here to see this, to see how I'm finally choosing me. My mind flashed to the night Charles stood between me and Javon when tensions flared, trying to shield me. I asked him not to go further. Now I wished he had. Guilt curled through my chest, then burned out. I would not shrink again. At that moment, I whispered, "I may have been quiet before, but silence ain't my story no more." By evening, I rearranged the living room into a chamber of reckoning, chairs in a semicircle, soft lamps casting gentle shadows. Charles's photo hung center stage, as though he were presiding. I asked Bernice and Miss Lurline to sit quietly nearby, not to speak, only to witness. I needed truth with witnesses. When Javon, Jamesia, and Rochelle arrived saying they'd agreed to a family meeting, the air tightened. I thanked them for coming and said I had unfinished business. Their eyes flickered. The polite veneer was already cracking. Javon exploded first. "When did you become judge, jury, and executioner?" His voice boomed. "You love that bike more than you love me." His face reddened so fast it hurt. Neighbors peeked through windows. I held my composure. "That bike was the only promise your father left me. You sold it like it was nothing." He recoiled. Jamesia gasped. Rochelle's lips parted, but no sound came. I reached into my purse, pulled out Charles's sealed letter, the one Raymond delivered. I let the silence swell, then read it aloud. "If any heir betrays the house, the inheritance is revoked." The walls felt closer. Javon's voice shook. Jamesia leaned forward. Rochelle's face turned ghostly. Folding the letter, I faced Javon again. "You chose the lie over love." Then I stood. I demanded he sign a restitution agreement, revoke his rights to the house, and accept consequences. I referenced my ledger, dates, transactions, names. His jaw clenched. Under pressure, he gripped the pen I offered and scribbled something. Jamesia jumped in. "You're exaggerating." I answered, "Truth doesn't need exaggeration." The room held its breath. The power shifted, the chair he once held, mine now. Javon stormed out, slamming the door. Jamesia followed, sobbing. I remained seated, heart thudding, yet strangely steady. Bernice rose. "You held your line, sister." Miss Lurline nodded silently. I looked from one to the other. "This house is mine. My legacy is mine." That statement lingered in the hush. Late that night, I hear the rev of an engine outside, and when I glance out, my heart drops. The motorcycle's back in the driveway. Dawn came like a whisper. The air was still, the house held its breath. I opened my eyes to silence, but that silence cracked with a distant roar. The engine's growl pulled me from sleep. Heart pounding, I slipped out of bed and moved to the window. Through the glass, I saw it. Charles's motorcycle, gleaming in the morning light, parked on the driveway as though it had never left. No one around. I shivered in my robe, bare feet cold against the floor. I walked down the hall, each step louder in the quiet. Outside, the bike sat like a ghost come alive again. On its seat, a folded note. "He wasn't worthy, but you were always watching." I picked it up, voice trembling. The garage door was warped just by a sliver. I pushed it open. Tools I once knew by touch. The smell of oil, metal, leather, lingering, a ghost of better days. I traced the handlebars gently. The memory hit me. Charles bent over that bike, wiping his hands, saying, "It ain't just a machine. It's my story in metal." I closed my eyes, felt his presence. I whispered, "I remember now, and I won't forget again." More than protection now, I needed reclamation. The world had taken too much. Later that morning, I installed a small security camera above the garage. Hidden, but focused. The work was slow, methodical. Wiring, angle, test. My hands steady, heart tight. After lunch, I powered it up and watched the overnight footage. My breath caught. There she was, Rochelle, pushing the bike in quietly under moonlight. No sound, no hesitation. She looked directly into the lens before leaving. No expression, just that cold, calm stare. I sat frozen, watching betrayal roll back into my life as she wheeled stolen memory home. Was it apology? Threat? A test? I shut off the feed. If she wanted a response, she'd come knock on my door. I didn't call Javon or Jamesia or Rochelle. They called me all afternoon. Texts. "You going to court? Stop this mess." I ignored them. On Sunday, I walked into church with my head held. No explanations. Bernice and Miss Lurline flanked me like guardians. The pastor preached about standing firm in the house God gave you. I listened. This wasn't a request for forgiveness. It was a demand for dignity. Night came calm, but inside me, the pressure boiled. I sat in my study, pen in hand. Names, dates, conversations, everything I had stuffed away all these years, spilled onto paper. It wasn't about the bike anymore. It was about writing myself back into the foundation I helped build. This house, this name, this story. I would no longer be a footnote. The letter I received the next morning wouldn't be about Charles' estate, it would be about me. The letter came on a quiet Monday morning. Official seal, thick envelope, my name typed clean across the front. I stood there a moment, coffee cooling in my hand, before opening it. Inside was a message from a probate lawyer representing Charles' old friend, Willie Harris. It wasn't bad news. It was unexpected truth. Charles had left a second will, dated just 6 months before he passed. It named me the sole inheritor of the motorcycle, the workshop, and the remaining bank assets. The paper itself wasn't signed, but attached was a recorded message. His voice, clear and heavy with time. If anything happens to me, let Odessa have it all. She's the one who kept this family standing. My knees weakened, but I didn't cry. I called the lawyer. He said the recording could hold up in court if I testified. For the first time, I didn't hesitate. Set the date, I said. I'm ready to speak. The courthouse felt colder than I remembered. Light slanted through tall windows, catching on the polished floor. Rochelle sat stiff on the left, flanked by Javon and Jamicia. They looked tired, or maybe just caught. I walked in wearing a navy blue dress, pearls, and a calm I hadn't known I still owned. Pastor Rucker joined me, a quiet force of faith. The judge called order. The recording played. Charles's voice filled the room, deep and familiar. I know I ain't always treated Odessa the best, but she never stopped holding this family together. The room went still. Javon lowered his eyes. Jamicia dabbed her face with a tissue. Rochelle didn't move at all. The sound of Charles saying my name after all these years, soft but sure, broke something open inside me, not in pain, but in release. The judge spoke clearly after deliberation. He ruled that the original will stood, but the new one revealed intent. Ownership of the motorcycle, the workshop, and the garage returned to me. The remaining money would be split equally. It was fair, it was final, but when the gavel struck, Rochelle stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. She didn't say a word, just left the room. Miss Lurline leaned close to me afterward, whispering, "Sometimes peace don't come from winning, sugar. It comes from walking away, holding your truth." I nodded. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was peace, the kind that doesn't shout. That evening, I went home and walked straight to the garage. The air smelled of dust and time, but it was mine again. I ran my hand along the workbench, then hung a small frame on the wall. Charles's photo, his dog tags, and a handwritten note. He tried in the end. I didn't forgive everything. I didn't have to. Forgiveness and peace don't always ride in the same car, but I did decide to stop carrying the hurt. I wrote a letter to myself and pinned it beside his picture. No one can reclaim you but you. Then I opened the window, let the wind rush through, and stood there breathing, really breathing, for the first time in years. Days later, life found rhythm again. I invited a few neighborhood teens to the garage, showed them how to fix a chain, patch a tire, check oil. Their laughter filled the air where silence used to live. I joined the city's senior engagement board, used my story as a lesson on ownership and dignity. I even painted the living room coral, a color Charles couldn't stand. Every stroke felt like renewal. On Sunday afternoon, while I was planting marigolds by the porch, my phone buzzed. A text from Rochelle. "I'm sorry, I'm not ready to talk yet, but thank you." I stared at it for a long time, smiled softly, and set the phone aside. There wasn't a big ending. No dramatic apology, no perfect family photo. Just the sound of wind, the hum of life moving forward, and me, finally standing on solid ground. It wasn't about the past anymore. It was about the peace that followed once I chose myself.